How did you manage to sleep through this?
That's my question. Like, low-key, I'm kind of disappointed in a way.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an interesting discussion sometimes. I'm Haran. I'm back with the boys. We got Harsha, Tarun, and Christian. And this week we have a special guest. Her name is Katie. I'll let her introduce herself to the podcast.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, do you want to just tell the podcast a little bit who you are, what you're doing right now, anything fun facts that you want to share? We can get into more of it later. But yeah.
Fun facts. Well, I live in LA right now. I just graduated from college, so I am working as a paralegal at a nonprofit for an immigrant rights organization. So we work with asylum seekers, mostly from Central America and Mexico, who are trying to get asylum and stay here.
Nice.
My fun fact is that I bought a bottle of wine, but forgot that I didn't have a bottle opener or corkscrew. So I used a lighter to make the cork.
Oh, that's a fire trick.
It heated the wine neck too much and it shattered, so I can't drink the wine at all.
Oh my god. That's very unfortunate. Was it an expensive bottle of wine or?
No, of course not. I'm working a nonprofit.
Very fair. Yeah.
Is that Coco Bond? Do I recognize that bottle?
Oh, it's Parker's Estate.
Oh, yeah. You lost me.
It was a favorite at the Food for Less, so of course I had to choose it.
Christian took a wine class senior year of college, and he thinks he knows everything about wine now.
Nah, man. Senior year of college seems like 8 years ago at this point.
Yeah, fair.
I won't pretend anymore.
How long have you been in LA for?
I moved here in, I think, August. So, is that 7 months? I'm not even sure.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Something like that.
Do you like it? I guess, well, you went to college on the West Coast too, right?
Yeah, I went to college. I went to Stanford, so up in the Bay Area in the Bay Area. And so I loved California. I loved the Bay Area. It was a cool place. Mm-hmm. So I thought LA would be similar, and it's really not. It's very different in the Bay. I don't know if any of you have noticed the dichotomy.
I mean, I know a lot of people shit on if you're from NorCal, you shit on SoCal and vice versa. Yeah. But I guess you've experienced both sides. So what's your take? What do you prefer lifestyle wise?
Lifestyle wise, okay. So the big differences to me appear to be NorCal is much more environmentally focused. Well, and NorCal is also just richer, so they have more infrastructure. I think for things like recycling and composting, and SoCal, I've seen so much styrofoam, more styrofoam than I've ever seen in my whole life, just everywhere on the street, in restaurants, whatever. So that was surprising. It was like a culture shock moment. And I just paid my taxes for the first time, my California taxes, and I mean, they already took all my money, so I don't know why they think I have any more to give them. But
is there no big benefit working for a nonprofit from the taxes, or no?
Well, you don't make as much, so you don't pay as much, I guess.
I guess that's huge benefit. I guess that's a benefit.
So what did you study at Stanford?
I studied anthropology. That was my major, and I did a minor in human rights as well.
Nice.
That was pretty fun. You're in Stanford too, aren't you? Right now?
I am. I'm at Stanford right now. Yeah, I'm finishing up my master's.
In what are you studying?
I'm studying mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not as interesting as yours, but still.
It's pretty interesting.
Well, what drew you to anthropology?
I actually took an anthropology class in high school. They had this random anthropology class, and it was a name for all of these things that I had already loved, different cultures and learning about why people do the things they do. So when I got to college, I took a bunch of anthropology classes, and every single one blew my mind. It made me think about the world so differently, and I loved that. I loved the way it turned things around.
Do you have a certain section of cultural regions in the world that you're more drawn to than others, or is it just in general all of them?
I I think in general, all of them, because I think what anthropology does well, it does like tend to focus geographically or geographically specifies its study, but it talks about things that happen throughout the world. So I think anthropology is really a study of power and power relations within a society. So how it manifests, who has power, who doesn't, what power looks like, how people get power, how people give power away, what power does. And like power is everywhere in the world, of course. That's just the story of being human. So,
Right.
So of course you can like study something in San Francisco, and it'll be specific to San Francisco, but there's also something that will echo something happening in Shanghai or Botswana or you know.
Yeah.
People in San Francisco have a lot of power because they have the power to just shit on the street.
Wait, what do you mean?
I think if you ask Tarun his number one, it's like, what's the first thing you think of when you think of San Francisco? He thinks of human feces on the side of the street.
That's what I think of in LA.
Well, that's because we had our friend Millen on the podcast before, and that was like his number one. Well, I don't know if his number one thing about San Francisco, but something that I feel like he reiterated.
I don't think it's anybody's number one favorite thing of San Francisco.
Well, I was just going to say like number one. I don't know what I'm saying actually.
I think it's number two actually.
Oh,
Nice.
Good one. Anyway, he said it a lot, so that's like all I know about San Francisco. So there you go.
but haven't you been there? No.
I think I went there when I was really young, but I haven't been back.
So you haven't been there to break the fantasy yet?
No.
Darn. Yeah, come back from that.
Hey, when you put this in this, bro, get us out.
Moving on swiftly. Bhavana actually, so Bhavana, a friend of the podcast and also a very good friend of Katie's, told us that you studied Arabic. Is that true? Or am I getting things wrong?
I did study Arabic for 3 years. It's a pretty hard language. I studied Spanish for like 1 year, and I like learned so much more than I ever did in 3 years in Arabic.
Is it
Spanish is easier language to pick up.
It's
right?
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, obviously it's a different script, but it's also is a different way of thinking about language and about like structuring language. And so it's not just like learning the vocabulary or the grammar of it, but it's like getting yourself into the psyche of an Arabic speaker, which is the beauty, but also the pain of it, right?
Yeah.
In Arabic, like all words come from a 3-letter root, or most words come from a 3-letter root. So it's really interesting to see which words are linguistically connected to each other, like by coming from the same root. So for instance, the word for university and Friday and like the verb to gather all come from the same root because, or meeting, whatever, because the root means to gather, and universities are places where people gather, and Friday is the holy day, so people gather at the mosque. And so it's like,
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see those connections, that etymology.
So what made you decide to start studying Arabic?
I was going to study French because that's what I studied in high school. And then I was confused by the online enrollment system before freshman year started. And I like felt like I was running out of time and I couldn't find the French classes. So I was like, oh, I'll just do Arabic.
So like a spur of the moment thing in the 3-year investment.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Do you guys speak any other languages?
No.
I guess we're bad immigrant children. I'm like, I can understand.
Speak for yourself.
I can understand Telugu, but I don't speak. I speak little bits and pieces here and there, but it's not great.
Yeah, same as Tarun for me, and same language as well.
Okay.
Yeah, my mother tongue is Tamil, and I can't understand or speak, but I can read the letters. So like I can read out like if someone like written out.
I think I could
Tamil,
read the letters, man.
I can put together what the like words are, but I just don't know what I'm saying, so it's kind of pointless. Yeah, but I guess I also have at one point I had a pretty good understanding of Spanish because I took like all the AP Spanish, but it's been years since then, so definitely I can still understand it, I think, pretty well, but I definitely can't speak as well as I was able to at some point.
Yeah, that happens. I opened like an Arabic homework by accident on my computer the other day. I was like, oh my god, I have no idea what this is saying.
Were you able to like ever like practice it, like go to like a Arabic speaking country and use it, or no?
Yeah, I studied in Jordan for a summer, which was super fun. But it's frustrating because in school they teach you Modern Standard Arabic, MSA, which is like almost Quranic Arabic. Like it's formal and it's very proper, and it's the same in all different countries. But people don't speak Modern Standard Arabic. People speak Ammiya, like dialect. So
Yeah.
I got there and like nobody understood what I was saying. I didn't understand what anybody else was saying. I was like 3 years for this.
Yeah.
But Jordan was a beautiful place. Like I really enjoyed my time there.
I can't imagine going to like a country like that where I guess like I know you knew the language, but at the same time it's still like that's so daunting because it's just like so far removed from like the US, I feel like.
Yeah, but in beautiful ways. Like there are so many beautiful moments of culture shock I had. Like I remember we like there's a cafe culture in Amman, at least, like the capital city. And people just go sit with their friends like every single day and just talk in the afternoons with like shisha and tea and it was so lovely. And like I remember one time I took out my phone because someone had texted me, and the other people at the table like turned around and they were like aghast. And they were like, "Put away your phone. What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm sorry." Imagine actually talking to the people that you're sitting with. What a concept.
Damn, they must. If they ever came here, they must fucking hate it.
Yeah, dude. Oh my god, so
We're
bad.
so focused on ourselves all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Have you guys studied abroad?
I did. I studied in Spain because I had a Spanish minor, so I spoke Spanish. I didn't get a chance to. I was really cut off, but by Tarun. But yeah. So I studied in Madrid, and so I did study abroad in Madrid, and then we did day trips to like Barcelona, and like Valencia, the Andalusian region in the south. Because my like one of the two like group leaders that we had, they're like a couple, even though they were both like master's Spanish teachers, like graduate level Spanish teachers, but they were like engaged and like they actually just had a kid like 2 years ago, and so like her family was all from the region that's like the southernmost part of Spain that like touches Africa. I forget what it's called, but she's from that region, and so she was like deeply rooted in like all of the southern Spanish culture. Like she knew how to do like all these like unique like not flamenco. What's the other dance version? I forget what it's called.
Flamenco?
Yeah, flamenco. I was close. I was a little
Damn, you went there.
No, I was thinking Flamengo, like the place in Brazil. Anyway, I spent 6 weeks there, and yeah, I've been dying to go back since that was. Oh my god, that was like 4 years ago now. 3. Yeah, yeah, it was a long time. It feels like forever, but yeah, it was definitely I always get ragged on because I always say, it's a, cliche. Oh, changed my life, all that kind of stuff. But it was definitely the most like eye-opening experience because, like you said, you get a lot of culture shocks like all around. Like even though people think that like Americans and Europeans like kind of act in the same way, like it's still really different with like all the different like cultural norms and that kind of stuff.
What sort of things stood out to you?
Well, like in Spain specifically, like the time of day is different. Well, like no, it's not. But
like their nighttime is a lot later than our nighttime. Yeah.
Yeah. So like their hours of operation, should you say, are like from 10 to like 3, like 10 a.m. to 3 a.m. Like you eat dinner probably like 9:30, 10 o'clock. Like that's the normal time. And then if you go out before like midnight in Spain on a weekend, that you're like a boomer. Like you can't be doing that. You just like everything fun happens like in the late of night, and like everybody just stays up later. And like everybody has a siesta, so like in the middle of the day they go home, and like most people just go home and like eat lunch and then go back to work, but some people do, like kids I think, or like young school going children, like go and actually take naps. I don't know. I thought that like the whole societal structure was better. Like, for instance, I just loved the metro there, and I'm not a public transportation kind of person because it was so easy to use. And and like the different sections of culture that were like throughout, specifically Madrid, because I spent most of the time there. Like there were, since it's all, because it's a huge international city, right? So it has a bunch of immigrant population. So you still got that sort of different kind of cultures from, mostly from like, I would say, like the Middle East and Northern Africa. I mean, there's also like French and pretty much everywhere but England and UK. But, you know, because they're annoying and loud, but I understand that. So yeah, it was just cool to see like the gathering of all these kinds of people. I can only imagine how different it is now after COVID and how things have changed there. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you would think that like, oh, like you may not speak the same language, but people like to lump in Americans and Europeans, or at least white Europeans, together to like, oh, it's all kind of sort of the same thing. But I think that every country like has its own. I mean, that's why they have different cultural regions and stuff, because they're just so different.
There was just a lot of information.
Yeah, take it all in. Take it all in.
So how's the phone use in Spain, Christian?
The phone use?
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Is it like here, or is it like Katie said in Jordan? Is it more like that?
Well, you have to remember that I went with like 23 other Americans.
Yeah.
So we infiltrated this place.
Well, the thing,
it's colonized.
Well, it's also like a really upbeat urban area too. So people are still on the phones, like in the panderias and all that kind of stuff, like all the time. And like there's like mini malls, and like I'd say it's still pretty like technology centric, but it's definitely not like it is in America, where like if you are without your phone for more than 45 seconds, you like have an anxiety attack. So I mean, it was a different kind of phone usage for me, because I had two phones, because I had my American phone where I did most of my stuff, and then I had like my national Spanish phone that like actually had like phone service. So like I didn't buy like an international plan, because it was just like it wasn't worth it for 6 weeks. Like if I was there for like 6 months, it would have been different. But it was just so weird having to like worry about like if I need to talk to somebody back home, I have to hit a hotspot on my Spanish phone, connect it with my phone, like my American phone, go to WhatsApp, and then talk to people back in the U.S. It's just such a long process. It was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the phone usage, I would say, is definitely more like Western, where it's like normal to pull your phone out of the table. But it's definitely, but we were taught more to like try and just adapt to what you see the people around you doing rather than what you're accustomed to doing, because you'll stick out like a sore thumb because you're an American. You don't give a fuck about what anybody else has to do or what they have to say. So
yeah,
it's definitely eye-opening.
I guess a question for both of you.
No.
Like, is there some like a specific like habit you picked up from like your study abroad experience, or just like other like, I guess we'll get to this later, but you've been to like other countries and you spent more time there. But just like a specific habit that you've picked up like from one of those trips that you like brought back here. It could be good or bad. I was just wondering.
That's a good question. I obviously people dress more conservatively in Jordan, so I wore like clothing that I wouldn't normally wear here. And ever since I've come back, like every time I put on clothes, in my mind I'm like, oh, could I wear this in Jordan? Yes? No? Probably not. The answer is never yes. But yeah, I remember coming back from Jordan and wearing a dress that like came to my knees. And the lower half of my legs felt so exposed for like the whole day. I felt like I was walking around naked. That was really different.
Dude, I don't know if I have any, like, I picked up like cooking stuff, and just like I would definitely say like my language use like exponentially grew, because like I took Spanish since I was in like 4th grade. I still like, even in college, like I still didn't know what the hell was going on, bro. Trying to use like transitive verbs and all this kind of BS, like ain't no way I knew what I was doing. So like actually I guess part of it is you don't really know how to use it unless you're like forced to in the environment. You know, it's so. I would say that's, but like, I don't know if it's something I do like every day. I definitely like, I do think about it like back then, like how I would act like on the streets. Like, I mean, not saying like I acted insane or whatever, but like all the like etiquette, I guess. Like I feel like people were more polite there though, for sure. Just as a general population, like they weren't like putting their jackets over a puddle for you to walk on, but like, you know, just regular like common decency, which I think we notice much more because it doesn't happen here a lot or as often as it should maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point you make. Like I remember like when I was taking Spanish in school, like we had like these things called pals where you kind of just like you like have to have like a conversation for like a minute essentially to record yourself. And like it just feels like I would like make mine so forced because I like pretty much like have a script that I like prepare in my head, but I feel like it wouldn't make sense like in like conversation to be using like además or like claro que sí. Like it's using like these like phrases that like you know like the listener is gonna love to hear, but like it's not like something someone actually uses in conversation. Yeah.
Oh, I it does remind me. I did have one habit that I picked up that was gone. Is that I started yelling obscenities in Spanish every time I was upset instead of in English. I was just like, puta da. Like I was just going like I started going off in Spanish because especially like when I'm at home, nobody knows what I'm saying. Nobody can tell that I'm that mad, you know. So like you know, it's easier like that. So it's just whatever. And I started making new words like putate is not a real word. Like that's just puta, and it's just not. It's not a word. So I start saying like nonsense, like gibberish in not English even. Like it's not real.
That's funny.
Did you ever feel, this is to Katie, did you ever feel judged for being an American in Jordan?
I think maybe sometimes people made assumptions about me because, not necessarily because I was American, although maybe because I was American, because I was white and because I didn't cover my hair, so... Like our landlord, I remember, would come up to our apartment, and we had a roommate who was Italian, and she like wore clothes that were probably not very appropriate for Jordanian culture. And he came up to our apartment and told us, what did he called her a whore, I think, or I'm not sure. If
oh my god!
Podcast. Called her a prostitute, and basically told us to tell her to stop dressing like that. But yeah, I think it's sort of like a liminal space where people see you and you're not part of the norm, so people feel like the normal rules don't apply to how they interact with you. Sometimes, not everybody. Most people were like lovely. Not in Jordan, but around the world, people like assume that I'm richer than I am, that I'm like... I remember there was this one guy in Mexico who was convinced that everybody in the United States like bought a new shirt every single day. I was like, I don't know anybody like that. And he was like, no, my cousins do it. Like they have a new outfit every single day. And I was like, well, your cousins are ballers because that is not what they are. Like, wearing a shirt I've owned for 10 years.
It's very different, I imagine, in Jordan than it is in Spain. But I found myself like, obviously, it's easier in Europe as a white person to blend in, right? So I was doing my best that I could to like blend in. Like I think the thing that improved the most while I was there was my accent, so people couldn't tell that I was American. So if I spoke the language well enough, they couldn't tell that I was some idiot from across the pond, as they say. So did you ever find yourself trying to like, I mean, blend in is kind of hard to do comparatively, but I don't know, trying to find yourself, I don't know, trying to seem less sticking out, I guess.
Oh, all the time. All the time. It's uncomfortable to be the person that sticks out all the time.
Yeah.
You have to build up like a callus. Even here in LA, like the Food for Less that I go to the grocery store, like I'm usually the only white person there. And I speak Spanish, right? So I want to speak Spanish to the people there. But they will, there's like a line ahead of me to the cashier. And one person goes by, go by. They all speak Spanish. And then I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I know it's coming. And I get to the cashier and she's like, okay, like, would you like one bag or two? And I'm like, take it.
Yeah.
Called out. another day recognized as the white woman I am.
It's funny because when we go to Malaysia, so my mom, she learned Bahasa, which is like the language that Malays speak. She learned that when she was studying in Singapore. So like when we go to Malaysia, we go like to the markets. They're trying to like buy stuff. Like you can pretty much haggle at these markets. But like if they know you're a foreigner, like they're of course they're not gonna indulge. Yeah. And one time, like, I was just like, I wasn't really like paying attention. I was like just doing my own thing. And then my mom was like in the process of haggling. And like she was speaking to the person in Bahasa. And then like I came up to her and said something like in English. I don't remember what I said. I was like, oh, I probably said like, oh, can we leave now? And then she was like, she just looked at me. And then she just like,
you're not my child.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And then like she like went back and spoke Bahasa to the lady. I think like she ended up not being able to get a deal because she knew that we were foreigners. But yeah, my mom was pretty pissed. So after that, I just stayed silent for the rest of the time.
Good man.
Yeah.
The last time I went to India, actually, they do this shit in India too. Even my parents are Indian. I mean, I'm also Indian, but they're stuff. But they went to like some like landmark in India where you had to pay a ticket to get in, and they had different ticket prices for people that are citizens of India and versus like not. So my parents were like, just don't say anything, just act like you're like from here and just walk in. And it almost worked. And then the person saw my mom's handbag that had like the boarding, like the ticket thing they put in the airport around your bags.
Oh, wow.
And then he was like, no, come back here. And then he made us pay more.
Come back here.
Come back here. That's tough.
It's actually racist, in fact.
How's it
Yeah,
racist?
I know.
Explain.
Because we're foreigners, you know? I feel like a lot of countries, they're like, you know, oh, you guys are foreign, like, you know, we'll treat you to a great time, you know? These people that are, you know, trying to take money from you, they're just like, you're not from
But would
here.
you, but if we like, if you're like, if there was like landmarks here that you get discounts because you're a US citizen, wouldn't you be happy about it?
No, in fact, I wouldn't.
Oh, really? You would pay the full amount instead of the
Because
discount?
actually, my dad is still not a U.S. citizen, so for his sake.
Are we
That's
sure we're
fair,
allowed to
that's
say
fair.
that? We're allowed to say that?
What?
What?
See that his dad's not a citizen?
Yeah. Do I need to give out your address?
No. We already gave out our social security numbers.
Is that going to be a U.S. citizen ad, bro? So,
Oh, no, I'm not the government. No. You have to listen to this ad 4 times, and then we'll reveal Tarun's dad's address, which is also Tarun's address. We'll be right back.
and we're back. I'm sorry if you actually replay that ad 4 times because we still will not be revealing Tarun's address.
It's after the 5th time, so do it again.
Stop. Anyway, back to what we were talking about before. Well, I guess we didn't really talk about this yet, but Katie, you mentioned to us that you're an NGO worker. First off, we don't know what that is. Or I guess we knew after we
Okay, we know what it stands for. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't really know what it entails.
Yeah.
So do you mind explaining a little more?
Yeah.
What that is?
Well, I'm not an NGO worker anymore, but I was. And it's a
False information.
NGO stands for non-governmental organization. So those are usually like little non-profit organizations that go work in different places and usually do like humanitarian or charitable. Charitable isn't the right word, but humanitarian-ish work. So I volunteered for an NGO in Greece, and I interned for one in the Philippines, and I worked in a couple in Mexico as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wait. Before you continue with the NGOs, you said you're now a paralegal, right? So, I mean, stupid question, but did you have to go to law school?
No, you can be a paralegal with no law school experience or no experience
I didn't know
whatsoever.
Yeah, you watch Suits, bro. You don't know Rachel.
Shut up.
Tell them about it, Harsha.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything. All my knowledge is from that fake show, so I don't.
That's all my knowledge too.
All right, I'm sorry. Let's get back to the task at hand here.
So what did you do at these NGOs? Like, what do they have you do?
Great question.
They were all different. So the NGO in the Philippines was this NGO that moves in like all over the world after emergency disasters happen. So they went to the Philippines after the typhoon in a year that I should know, which I think is 2015 or 2016. I could be wrong. But then they stayed to help rebuild like the local economy and to work with different farmers and schools for a lot of different like prongs of approaches. But that was a lit internship because they paid for everything, including my flight. And I just like got to observe basically their operations on the ground. So they had one group working with, as I said, farmers in this agriculture project that they had. So a lot of the farms were destroyed in the typhoon. So they were working with farmers to develop new technologies when they were rebuilding their like crops and agriculture systems. And then they had like a different area that was focusing on human trafficking. So they were educating like local schools about how to recognize traffickers and when they come to like rural areas and how to build up defenses against trafficking. And then there were like more urban centers where they had stationed like, or they worked with the government. I mean, this NGO didn't do it, but they worked with like local government people and station people and transit centers to look out for trafficking and train people how to recognize it, things like that. So I just got to watch all of it happen. It was really cool and talk to people.
That sounds nice.
I didn't do anything. I mean, I got to be in the Philippines. I got to see how NGOs work. So it was a really cool learning opportunity.
So was it a more hands-on experience when you went to Greece or Mexico?
Yeah, Greece. Greece, I was working in an NGO in a refugee camp on this island called Samos. And we like had this little center just on the street from the camp, and we ran language classes and music classes and provided a space for people to feel dignified because the conditions in the camp were really inhumane and terrible.
These are refugees from where?
They were from Syria, from Afghanistan, from the DRC, from Cameroon, from Palestine.
Oh, wow. Big.
So so mostly like Arab and Northern African like regions.
Nice.
Yeah, that was it was like a very traumatic and life-turning experience.
Yeah.
So I remember like the year I came back from it, it was just the only thing I could think about. I remember like I took this class on the history of South Africa, and every day I would walk out of that class like having heard 2 words the whole time, because the whole time I was just thinking about like the people I'd met and the things I had seen, and just like feeling very stuck in that space.
Yeah.
So how did that change your life perspective, or did it?
It did, and not necessarily in positive ways. Like, I think I realized that I had believed in these universal balances of good and evil, and of pain and relief, and of suffering and of redemption. And I had always sort of innately believed that redemption and relief and joy and salvation would triumph over these other things. And I realized that that isn't the case. That I think I heard recently some quote from somebody that says that justice doesn't exist, like people make justice, or you make justice happen. And that was so true. Like that is exactly what I saw in that place. Not necessarily that people were making justice happen, but that justice doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So
how different was that experience from the one in Mexico too?
It didn't have the same emotional rawness, and I'm not really sure why, because people were still fleeing really horrible situations, and part of the trauma of being in that liminal space, if I can use that phrase again, is that people are not out of the trauma yet, and they're not in a safe space where they can start to recover from it, and they're being re-traumatized by the space in which they're in too. So that was also true in Mexico as it was in Greece. But Mexico, what was more traumatic was just like the culture of toxic masculinity, not from Mexican people, because actually the people that I was mostly around were Central Americans, or from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. And I just personally felt really noticed because of my white skin and my blonde hair and being female, of course, in that space. So that was like a very dehumanizing experience in many ways. I'm still trying to figure out how to articulate the differences between like the experiences in Greece and Mexico. But
yeah, I mean, when you see those sort of like inhumane types of conditions, I think it's kind of hard to put them into words sometimes. It's just an experience, and it's hard to translate it, from, or maybe process it even sometimes for people to like make it make sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Especially since they're all like obviously terrible, but they're in such different ways that to compare them isn't fair.
Yeah,
And
it's
to
like
try and
it's not
so
fair.
they're just so different and they're so unique in their terribleness.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
When I try to describe like this camp that people had to live in Greece, like I often just revert to statistics or anecdotes of people that I met there, like I don't know, rats that I saw or something like that. But it doesn't capture like the heaviness of the atmosphere and just like the heaviness of the people and the sense of waiting and of pendulous waiting, because people are stuck there for like years sometimes waiting for their cases to be processed. So it was just like something that weighs you down just more and more and more and more.
Well, a lot of these like individuals, like were they like families or were they kind of like varied?
Some are families. A lot of them were just single young men, which ironically is kind of a detractor from success. Like it's not an advantage to be a single young man because families are prioritized in this asylum process. So the single young man, even if you've arrived there before a family, you'll probably be processed after them, if at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you see like many refugees in Spain?
I wasn't there. Like, so obviously, it was through like Virginia Tech, right? So, and it was like a sister college there, which is more for international students. So I would expect their idea, because they guided a lot of what we did, is they're trying to not have us experience those kinds of things. So I didn't, but that definitely doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And I'm sure I wasn't totally at the time aware of like all the governmental processings of things that go on in Spain. I was very aware of some of its history with like Franco and that kind of thing. But I mean, there was probably one instance that off the top of my head that I can remember where there was like an effort or some sort of notice to some sort of help towards people outside the country, or like this is a shelter for people who have immigrated in. But I think especially because Madrid is dead center in the middle of the country, like a lot of immigrants, I would presume, I don't know if it's true or not, would come from like the outside, like where there's like water boundaries or where there's international boundaries. So in order to make it all the way to Madrid, I would imagine would be a hard journey. But I'm sure if I went back to Andalusia or even up in Barcelona, where it's like in the borders of France and there's water and there's the sea, I imagine there's way more up there. But no, I think a lot of, because it was such a guided experience, I wouldn't necessarily say they were trying to hide it. They were just trying to like, if they don't know, they don't know kind of thing about it. So it's definitely not something they outwardly said like, oh, these are all of the things that are going on in the country. And I think we were hidden a little bit from like the cultural or the governmental side of a lot of things that happened. So no, not a lot of refugees, but there was definitely a huge mix of people whose like not ancestors, like long time, but grandparents and that kind of stuff were immigrants. And there was definitely a huge mix of people from all across the world there.
Yeah, I feel like when you see like things like this that happen domestically or like especially internationally, you don't really understand like the gravity of like how terrible these situations are for people. You kind of just see the ticker on the news. You're like, oh yeah, that kind of sucks, and then you just move on with your day. But unless you like dive in deeper or like actually go there like you did, I feel like I can't imagine like how I would react if I saw that.
Yeah, and it's always tricky talking about Greece because so much of it was terrible. But also because my mindset was terrible, and so I don't want to discount like the ways that people actively
Yeah.
worked to make their situation better. And I
Mhm.
always remember this guy who used to be a pastor in Cameroon, and he had such a lovely presence, and he always wore this white sweater that I think was the only like shirt he owned because he always wore it and it was so hot. I was like, how are you wearing that sweater all the time?
Yeah.
And he had such a calm presence about him, which was really noticeable because a lot of people had anxious energy, had depressed energy, I mean, understandably, obviously. But I remember him telling me once that he just sat in his tent, or that earlier that day, he had been sitting in his tent in the camp in silence, just in awe of God's grace. I was like, I was stunned. Like, I always think about that, and I think about the feeling I had at that moment because I was stunned, but not for good reasons in that camp.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to still find beauty or to still find peace in that sort of atmosphere was so shocking to me.
Yeah. I guess one more thing about Greece I was thinking about, like, was there like a feeling in the nation that was like kind of like disdain towards these migrants? Because I know like during that time, like I guess I don't know about right now, but like I know Greece was like through like economic crisis at that time. So I'm sure like I feel like there's probably like the majority of the population, like we don't want to bring more people into this country. Like, why are we doing this? Like, did you get any of that when you were there?
There was definitely some of that sentiment on the island. And it's hard because I think at first when refugees started, I mean, I think refugees have always been coming through Samos, but when they first started arriving in droves, like once the civil war started in Syria, like I think people were actually very receptive to the people coming to the island and wanted to make it hospitable and wanted to help them. But it's just been such a prolonged experience that it's like, as you said, they have an economic depression too, and it's like a drag on the economy. And I mean, there are all sorts of people in all sorts of categories, right? So some people living in the camp would steal from people living on Samos or would, vandalize some properties.
Yeah.
And so I think the sentiment turned, not completely, there's still some people who are sympathetic to the situation, but it's hard to have a camp of 7,000 people who don't have many opportunities to work on the island, who don't have opportunities to like contribute to the economy because they're not allowed to. So, yeah.
So Katie, I'm sure you like befriended like a lot of different people in all these different countries. Do you feel like there was like, I know you were talking about that, the guy who you said had such a calm presence around him. Do you feel like there's like some medium, whether it's like music, dance, food, or something that you feel like, despite a language barrier or whatever other cultural barriers, could always like unite or integrate people together in a calming way, or like in a way that comforts people?
That's a great question. I would say all of those that you mentioned are all unifying factors. I think especially food. Like I remember, it was, what was it? I think it was Ramadan while I was there. And so I like Googled like what are some common Ramadan foods that people eat from Palestine, because I was teaching a French class and all my students were from Palestine. And so I went to like the bakery in Greece, and they actually had foods that were pretty similar, I mean, understandably, to what people in Palestine might eat during Ramadan. And so I like got some special cookies and I brought them in. And the way, like I remember this one guy, Mohammed, like the way he lit up when he saw these like cookies. I can't remember what they were, but they were like, I think they had dates, or they were covered in powdered sugar. That's the only thing I remember. And the way he lit up when he saw them, I just like will always remember that. That feeling. But
yeah, I feel like eating a meal together like definitely brings some sort of sense of like family, like no matter who you're with. Especially if it's like the food's really good and everyone's kind of quiet and you're kind of all just like enjoying it, just like scarfing it down together. It just, I feel like that's like a very familial feeling.
Do you have like a favorite meal in your memory?
Favorite meal?
Yeah. Or maybe not a meal.
Do you have one?
No. But I remember like specific moments of eating like something in a special place or like a special moment.
Yeah. I've told this story before, but like while I was in Spain, we would go to this one, like it wasn't a bar, but like they had tapas and like they had beer, and I don't know. It was just a place that we went like once every like week or so, like the entire like study abroad group, and like our, I don't know if you can call them guides, but they were teachers at the college or whatever. We would all go to this bar, and we went, and the Women's World Cup was on, and like the U.S. was playing Thailand, I think, and U.S. is like always like great at women's soccer, and so they were up like 3-4-0 at halftime, and this guy Riley, who was in my group, he was like, "Yo, if they score double digits, like I'll get everybody like those chupitos, which is 2 shots of like straight vodka, or tequila." And it's like, "Okay, Riley, whatever you want, bro." So we're all just like having beer and like eating tapas or whatever, and like gradually, like the score keeps going up like 7, 8, 9. And Riley's like started to sweat because like this is like 30 people and like 60 shots is like a lot of money.
Yeah.
So Riley's like, "Bro, I don't know if I can do this." And he's like, "I'm gonna need Thailand to like lock it the fuck in." But then it was like in extra time, like the US scored, and I have this video on my phone. And everybody just like starts cheering. Like we had this one little section in the bar. We all just start cheering. And you just pan to Riley. He looks like a defeated man. He was just so dead. But the best part,
I bet
about
you
that
like the locals at the bar, like, dude, look at these
They were
Americans
like,
celebrating.
yeah,
11-0
what
win.
is
Dude, Americans fucking suck.
Yeah, what is going on? But the best part about it was because we've been there like a couple of times, and like we knew a couple of like the staff, like we talked to them a couple of times. They were like, we told them like what was going on, and so they were like, they cheered for us, like whatever, like when they scored, but then they only made him pay for like half of them, so they only made him pay for like one round, or yeah, so it was like a good experience of like, you know, feeling like a part of like not the culture, but like culture eyes, like within like, I don't know, just having fun with people like in the community, I guess you could say. So that was probably like the one that sticks out the most.
I went back to Greece the summer after I worked there to visit some people that I met in the camp. And one of my friends had me stay with him. He had like moved to a different camp on the mainland, so he wasn't on the island anymore. And so I went to visit him, and like the day that I arrived, he took me around to meet all the different families in the camp. And every family like insisted that I drink a cup of coffee with them. So by the end of the night, I had like 20 cups of coffee.
Oh my god.
I like don't drink coffee. I like drink half a cup and my heart is racing. So I was like dying. But I couldn't express that to anybody because even my friend like didn't really speak English, and they were Kurdish, so they spoke Arabic, but like not. My Arabic was so shitty, like it wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
So I was like dying, couldn't tell anybody. 20 cups of coffee in. It was horrible.
Ron, you gotta have a meal that sticks out in your head, man.
I love mee goreng. I love it. That's what
I do love mee goreng.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess every time we would come, like we go to Malaysia, the flight always lands like pretty late there. I think we land around like, by the time we get out of the airport, it's usually like midnight, if not later. And every time, like my cousin or like my aunt will pick us up from the airport, and like they'll drive us right to, because like they have like night markets there that stay up pretty late because people like stay up pretty late there. And we always get like roti canai as soon as we get up, which is like prata in Malaysia. It's just like, I guess I should explain that one more. It's like flaky bread, I would say, kind of. I don't really know how to explain it. Yeah, you pretty much just eat it with like some curry, like it could be like fish curry or something. And it's like my favorite food in Malaysia, and it's just like, it's like the best introduction every time like I land, just go straight there like at midnight, like a midnight snack. Yeah, I feel like those always stick out to me.
Harsha,
you're a big food eater guy. Come on, you can't say McDonald's. That's not fair.
McDonald's,
dude. I know, because I know he would.
That's the global food that brings everyone together.
I know
they have crazy deals on the app, you know. Guys take advantage. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's this place in India, like near my grandparents' house, that it's called the Dadus, which is and they sell like snacks, basically like Indian snacks, not necessarily like sit down restaurant food. So like quick food, and it's something that I mean.
Wait, this is like packaged, like is that packaged? snacks or
Package?
No, like
Packaging.
it's like pav bhaji, which is just like bread and like some like curry thing.
It's like
Okay.
Indian
like,
sloppy
like that
joes.
type of like that type of food, like some pani puri, like things like that.
Okay. Like appetizers.
So appetizers, I guess is a better word. Yeah, so like that type of food, I just really enjoy it there because it's you can get that stuff here, but it's just not the same. And like that's also open like pretty late at night, so you can just go and you just feel really shitty after because it's so unhealthy. But it's really
That's
good.
the best part.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I was thinking for a while about my favorite meal. I don't know if I could necessarily pinpoint one, but I know there's like tons of days that I've had where it's like a long day or like post traveling or something like that, and then my mom will make food, and then when you eat that and you just go to sleep right after, it's just like one of the best feelings. Because I think I could always eat her food, you know. So
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say Milanos and chocolate milk.
yeah, Katie, since you don't know, I drink like one Horizon chocolate milk like every night before bed, or like if I don't do that, then I'll drink it like I'll drink 2 the day after or something.
Really make up for it.
Yeah. I am a child, but just don't hate me for it. Going back to I guess like the way you felt as a woman in Mexico and stuff like that. Do you think the woman experience is like pretty consistently, I guess like the same throughout like all these different countries you've been to? And if that is the case, do you think you feel like more empowered being a woman in the US because you have more opportunity to like invoke change? I think I guess that's like a fair assumption to make, but I don't know.
That's a good question. I definitely don't think that being a woman is the same in every single country that I've been to.
Mhm.
But I also have positionality because of my race, because of my nationality. So me being a woman in Mexico, for instance, is not the same as like a Mexican woman being in Mexico. Right?
Yeah.
Because people perceive us differently. We come from different standpoints and different perspectives. But I think that the experiences that I have as a woman are all across the world are like all part of the same poison, which is the patriarchy. So definitely I feel much freer here as a woman, although not completely free, obviously. But even the harassment that I experience here, I think is the same thread or the same token as the harassment that I experience in a different place, even if it's more severe or even if it manifests differently in a different place. Like I think it's also part of the same schema of thought, of belief, of power. So do I feel like I can affect change from here? Maybe within America, maybe within my community.
Yeah.
Given like the history of colonialism and imperialism, I don't really feel like I as a white woman can go into a different space and tell people how to be a woman or tell people how to act.
Right.
So
Going back to the Mexico thing, something that Haran and I had like learned about that happened like what would you say like a month ago, Haran?
Yeah, like a month and a half.
This kind of like goes into the I guess you were talking about like the toxic masculinity portion of like what happens in Mexico. There's this soccer team in Querétaro called Querétaro FC, and basically they had a match, and from what I remember, like out of nowhere, basically they have like ultra fans, right? They have like fan groups that are like really, really hardcore. Some of them are like sponsored by the teams and some of them are not. And a lot of them get, because they're like so hardcore, like for example, in Italy, there's some that are like had like ties to Mussolini, like there's some like really deep rooted political BS goes on like within these hardcore sports teams or fan clubs, I guess as they're called. Anyway, the ones in Mexico are often deep rooted within the cartels. And so from what I remember at this one match, like the game was still going on, right, Haran?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
When basically there's just like fights started breaking out in the crowd between, it wasn't even just like fans of the opposite teams. It's just like straight brutal like fist fighting going on out of nowhere. It spilled onto like the game itself. Like they called the game off like while it was still going on. Like, and at first they were like, there were these videos going on Twitter of people like just like straight dead. Like obviously dead, getting trampled, all these sorts of things going on. And at first, like the Mexican government came out, or the local police, I think, maybe the Mexican government came out and said, "Oh, nobody died. Like they just didn't happen." And then, like you can, unfortunately, you can just obviously see dead people. Like people were being dragged out, like dead, and so it kind of feeds back into that thing you were talking about, how like it's not okay, clearly, but in their minds, it's just like part of how they, I don't know, like operate or see things. I'm missing like a huge chunk of this story, and I don't really know how to fill it in. Can you please help me?
I mean, I think you know more than I do about the whole thing, but I mean, like fan violence in football is like something that's been going on for like many years. Not even just in Mexico, like in Europe, it's pretty bad. But yeah, I don't know.
Like I don't even know how to like explain like how or why it happened.
Yeah,
like basically, like these groups that are tied to the cartels and the drug gangs and all the stuff that goes on within Mexico basically just started this huge fight at this one soccer match, and like the stands were like complete. It looked like a bomb went off within the stadium, just because like everything was just like completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that kind of speaks to like what you were talking about, how like Haram was saying, it's like part of the culture, but like to that extent, for something like that to happen, like that does not happen like every week or every year or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it kind of comes to the point where you have to ask. I mean, it's easy for me to say like, oh, you guys have to ask yourselves like, stop, or what's the point? You know, it's easy for me to say that because it's not my culture. I don't know how, you know, you operate like that, right? It's not for me to say, but at the same time, like when you see this just like brutal murder, pretty much, like you have to, I think, look at it in a greater picture and be like, okay, what is going on here? Like there's no obvious right answer, but there has to be some sort of change that goes on to where maybe as a society you don't change, but like you have to tweak something to where this like hairpin trigger just doesn't result in that sort of like massacre, I guess.
And I don't want to like exoticize toxic masculinity either.
Oh, for sure.
And I think like what you're talking about, I could imagine happening maybe in Texas or somewhere where there's like a
strong.
Yeah. I mean, that's a different kind of football, but football culture.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've never like related, I'm not really into sports, so I've never like related to the feeling of being on a team or being with a team.
It's not worth it.
What's really interesting to me is that people say we won that game, or like instead of they, like the team, like it's us. And I'm like, were you playing? Like, I don't think so. You don't look like it.
But like we are emotionally involved, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I feel, at least.
Yeah. Okay. You can play Bhavana though, because you know, she's a Dallas Cowboys fan. That's the worst.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of fan.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Bhavana.
Yeah, I wish I didn't know that.
All right, Ryan, you dug yourself in a hole. Dig it out.
Dig it out. No, dude, I stand by that. That's like the first thing I knew about her. Like when we met in high school.
Yeah, and then you continued down the path.
Yeah, there were warning signs. You know, I could have. No, I'm just kidding. I know she's still. I don't know if she's still listening.
I'm cutting
she
that
is
out.
still.
Cutting that out.
No, keep it in.
Actually, wait, Katie, when we met in LA, you told a quick story about how you had, I don't want to say run-in, but I don't know, correspondence with MS-13. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh my god.
Correspondence, that makes it sound like we write letters to each other.
You trying to implicate her or something?
No.
Of course.
We can cut this out later.
Yeah, so I worked in two places in Mexico. One was in the south in a little town called Tenosique, which was on the border with Guatemala. And the other was in a place in the north called Nuevo Laredo, which was a cartel town. But in the south, there are like lots of people coming through. Like people stay in the camp for like 2 days, 3 days. Sometimes people stay longer, but people are often transitional or transient. So we have a lot of people coming through that we don't necessarily know their story or who they are. And one night, we were awakened by this pounding on the gate. And so, like, we all go outside. Actually, I was asleep during this, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately. It sounds like a terrible thing. I didn't wake up for this. I just right later. Other people went outside, and these people were banging on the gate. Or I think it was just one man at first who was banging on the gate. And he was like, let me in, let me in. And we're like, what's up? And he was like, you're harboring a fugitive. And we're like, what? And it turned out, so this guy was from almost 13, and he had been pursuing this guy from Honduras that was staying in our refuge for the night.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously we didn't let him in because no.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay, well, you watch what happens. So he leaves, and 30 minutes later he comes back with like 3 other guys, and they all have machetes, and they force open like the gates to the refuge.
Oh my God.
And they come in and they say, in Spanish, obviously, but they're like, the Hondurans give orders here now, like rivers of blood will run in Las Tentairos, which is the name of the place. And so they're like brandishing machetes, and they're shouting these things, and they're like after this poor guy who is trying to run away from them, who's probably hiding in his bed. And so we call the police, and the police were supposed to have been there the whole time, but they left to go get tacos or something. And so they came, we call the police. The police come. They're like, oh, sorry. And the only thing they do is they make the MS-13 members leave the refuge, but they don't do anything else. Like,
Oh my God.
they don't imprison them. They don't like remove them from this dangerous situation they're creating.
Jesus.
Which is pretty typical, honestly, for the police in Tenosique.
How did you manage to sleep through this?
That's my question. Like, low-key, kind of disappointed.
You
in a
literally had
way.
an overthrow while you were asleep. That's pretty impressive. I'm not gonna lie.
Long days in the camp.
Fair.
And then in the camp in the north, in Nuevo Laredo, which was a cartel town, as I mentioned, we didn't necessarily have any run-ins with the cartel, but it's like a very weird atmosphere living in a place like that, because you can't just go around and like walk around town, because if they don't know you, they're going to come ask. They have people everywhere. They have people on the street corners. Everybody's involved, from the people helping you park, from the like lady selling quesadillas to like the woman at the OXXO, which is like a 7-Eleven. And so they have eyes everywhere. They have ears everywhere. And so if they don't know who someone is in the town, first of all, they'll know immediately that you're there. And second of all, they'll like come up and ask you who you are and what you're doing there, where you came from, who you're seeing, who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So mobility is very observed.
Mm-hmm.
So the only place I ever went was like the grocery store, which is a block away. And then we traveled to the camp from our house in a van. But there was a house 2 houses down from ours that was obviously involved with the cartel, because they had these raucous parties every weekend, every Friday and Saturday. Like, they would blast this music, and they would have dancers come, and they would have clowns perform, and they would have all this catered food. And, like, nobody else could afford to do that, so obviously it was blood money funding these parties.
Did you get the invite?
No, I was like, come on.
I was just asking. You know?
Yeah, too bad. Just kidding. I don't want to go to a party like that.
What do you think? Like looking at it as an overall living experience, what do you think is the hardest thing to adapt to like having to, as somebody, I mean, to look at it from our perspective, not as from the refugee perspective, which is obviously like greatly different. But what do you think is the hardest thing to adapt from having to go from your normal life to one of these camps and then back to your normal, like kind of going in and out?
The hardest part is probably like constantly refiguring yourself within this different environment and different cultural norms and different situation.
Mm-hmm.
So like the person that I could be in Greece was very different from the person that I could be in Mexico.
Right.
Like renegotiating those terms of identity and self with yourself in this place, I think was one of the most difficult things. Like in Mexico, there was just constant like the harassment and the attention and the comments. And I was reading this book at the time which talked about this. It was kind of a retelling of Snow White almost, but there's this girl who I think was really beautiful. I forget the whole story, but people like paid a lot of attention to her. And there's one line of the book where she talks about how it's hard to find what's left of yourself after people take so much by looking at you. And I really related to that in the moment because I felt so superficial there, because I felt like I was just this body, just this shell, like existing in this space to be looked at and taken. And it was like work to find myself within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bars.
So given that you're a well-traveled person, what's the next country you have your eyes on? Like, where would you want to go next?
I would love to go to India. I wanted to go to India ever since Bhavin and I became friends. It's been a long time of wanting to go to India. But realistically, I think Colombia is going to be my next venture. I'm watching this Colombian telenovela, and they drink hot chocolate every day, it seems, for breakfast. So that definitely seems like a reason to go
So now instead of
somewhere.
getting 24 coffees and whatever, you have 24 hot chocolates. Sounds a lot better.
Yeah.
If you go to India, remember to take off the luggage stickers from the airport.
You know what?
Yeah,
I think
passes
that will be
Indians.
the
That's what would give me away for sure.
You should go with Bhavna. I feel like she'd be a good Indian person to travel with. I feel like I would be
good tour guide
useless
for
there.
sure.
Yeah.
She's invited me several
very
times.
knowledgeable.
I don't know why I haven't taken her up on it yet. Next time she does, I'm not saying no. So let her be warned.
Is it because she's a Dallas Cowboys fan?
yes,
It all comes back to
indeed.
that.
Because I heard that's a big
Deterrent.
yeah.
Personality flaw.
Dude, Bhavna catches so much smoke on this podcast.
That's
Yeah.
okay, man.
All the time.
It's up to Haran to stop it, honestly. But he just feeds into it more. Actually, he's the one who feeds into it the most out of all of us.
Any publicity is good publicity.
Facts. Except when you're shitting on your
Sure.
own girlfriend.
Yeah. I think you're actually the biggest loser in this scenario.
Herman, can I ask you a personal question? What's something that you love about Bhavana?
Oh my
Oh, let's go.
Oh.
Let's go.
Has Haran ever answered this straight?
He's
like,
never answered
No,
it. We've asked him
God.
this question so
we
many
haven't
times.
talked about this.
No, we
What?
have. We've had
have.
calls before where Bhavna's
You
there.
always
Yeah.
say some BS.
There's so many choices. So many
Yeah, this is where he starts waffling. He's like, "Oh, there's so much."
That's what a person that
I think
has never thought about
she's
this.
very determined. And like it's like for example, like her job, like it's been like kicking her ass, but like she never like really backs down. Like she's always like every day I'm like, you should just like quit, like find a job that's a lot easier on you. Like I feel like this is a lot, but like she's like so determined to prove that she's worth it, and she she can do it, and like that's really admirable, because I don't think I would be able to do that if I was getting worked for that long. And also it's fun because like if we ever get like in an argument, like I'm also very stubborn, so like I won't give in, and like she won't give in, so it's just a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. Sounds like nothing gets done.
It's like not like real arguments. I meant like it'll be like
okay.
if we're talking about like football or something, like because she's a Cowboys fan, I'm a Commanders fan, like
Change your name every year.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, I think that's probably the quality that I.
Yeah,
I guess
if we ever
admire
ask that
those.
question, we're not getting a fucking answer. No way in hell.
What do you? Wait, I've said that before. I think.
No, you've never
You
said
think?
that. Christian, you're cutting that out though, right?
No, that's staying in 1
Yeah,
million.
just for my answer, I just said there's a lot of things. Just keep that in. Jordan, what's the quality that you find the most admirable in me?
In you?
Ever? Yeah.
Oof.
Why make it about yourself? Just because your birthday's in 30 minutes? What the
No,
fuck,
we
man?
can just do like a circle around. Like, we ask each other.
Katie, you want to go first? I
In
love
the last
that.
hour and a half, what have you learned?
I love that Haran thinks Bhavana is determined.
That is what I was going to say.
I love that Katie brought that out of us after so much Bhavana slander.
Yeah, we have to.
It's
we
only
have to-
fair. It's only fair.
fair.
Okay.
That's what real friendship looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh.
Is there any other juicy NGO stories that you want to retell?
Oh man, there are too many.
Is there an uplifting one?
An uplifting one.
It's okay if it's not.
If it's not, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I just don't want to shame your stories, but
I guess one thing I would say is like the year after I came back from Greece and I thought about all these people, they were very much stuck in this terrible place that I had them in my memory.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw a lot of them, not a lot of them, but a few of them the next year, and they had all
Right.
moved out of that camp and they were in different parts of their lives and not necessarily further along in the asylum process, but
Mm.
seeing them there allowed me to reimagine them in a happier place and also not like stick them there myself, like
Mm.
not attach their personalities or their persons to this place of tragedy that I held in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like seeing growth and growing myself.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the expanse of time is like an uplifting thing, I think.
yeah, during this episode, I did look up, and I think it said like the Greek refugees went from like 45,000 a couple years ago to like 4,500 last year or something. So that's a crazy improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they closed that camp actually that I was working in and they moved it to a different part of the island. So
Mm.
that camp doesn't exist anymore.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah,
I mean that, like,
that's a good
genuinely.
question.
Like if you close a camp, like that could be like because nobody needs to go there, or you're closing a camp because you can't
So you
afford
try
to
to
hold them.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they moved
I'm
it.
hoping it meant to like, integrate it
Yeah.
with everyone.
I think they
but-
moved it farther away from town, so it's more remote. So I think a lot of people would not think that it's a good thing. At least people who live in the
Mm.
camp probably would like to be closer to like other
Mm.
civilization. I mean, the original camp was built for 750 people, and at the peak of it, there were like 7,000 people living there. So it was
Oh
like
my
not a place
God.
for that sort of quantity of people in any sort of
Yeah.
circumstance.
That's the kind of growth we're looking to make in our listeners' number. Go from 75 to 7,500 in the next 3 weeks.
First, hopefully we get to 75 listeners first. Sound
Whatever.
good,
Hey,
everybody?
what?
Hey,
Oh yeah.
hey,
Oh
hey,
sorry.
hey.
Yeah.
Hey,
But yeah, that's all the time we're gonna have today. We want to thank Katie for coming on this podcast. It was a lot of fun. We learned a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug or say to our listeners?
To the listeners, but I had so much fun on this podcast. Thanks for staying up so late to talk to me.
Awesome. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
So if you like this episode and want to listen to our other episodes, head over to our Spotify for our podcast at interesting. Sorry, not at. There's no ad on Spotify. on interesting discussion sometimes, and then like our content at an interesting discussion.
There you
You
go.
can also find our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, TikTok, SoundCloud, YouTube,
LinkedIn.
Facebook,
LinkedIn. We just joined there.
LinkedIn, Be Real, yeah, everywhere. So make sure to tune into the next episode. We're gonna have a really, really something amazing planned for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.